Hello, I'm Dolores Casey and I'm Executive Librarian with the responsibility for Children's and School Services for Cork County Council Library and Arts Service. And I would like to introduce Jess Kennedy, who's a senior paediatric occupational therapist and founder of MYOT&ME, which provides interactive and fun learning resources for kids, parents and educators. The focus of MYOT&ME is to empower parents and support children to engage in purposeful play, develop confidence and be as independent as possible. So today, we're going to discuss OT tips and strategies for parents as part of the NEWSTART programme, which is Cork County Council Library and Arts Service literacy, early years literacy programme supporting numeracy, early literacy and writing skills. It aims to support children with additional literacy needs, including dyslexia and dyspraxia. And Jess, I think today we're going to discuss three different areas with strategies and tips. We have three that we think would be most appropriate, I think. Number one would be how to sit still. Mm-hmm. Number two is homework tips. And number three is my child loses everything. Mm-hmm. How does that sound?
Sounds perfect. Thanks, Dolores. So yeah, it's great to have an OT involved. So thank you for asking me, because sometimes it can be very academic focused, but I think that kind of OT piece is so important, especially around the topics that we were kind of chatting about there. So thanks for having me.
Great. We're delighted to have you. So the first topic we are going to discuss, I think, is probably something that a lot of parents deal with on a daily basis, and it's how to get your child to sit still. Mm-hmm. First of all, Jess, I suppose the most important thing to ask is, why do some children find it difficult to sit still? That maybe might give some parents some insight.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, the why behind things, because sometimes I think we think that we all sit still, but we actually don't. So nobody actually sits perfectly still. When we're learning or we're concentrating, we're often fiddling. So we might be touching something, we might be drinking a coffee as an adult, we might be shifting in our chair. So every child moves a little bit, fidgets a little bit. That is very normal, very typical development. It's necessary. When we have a little bit of movement, it helps us concentrate and focus. And we even know that as adults as well. For particular children, now this is very dependent on age, because obviously younger kids can't sit for as long as an older child would. So number one is to make sure that the expectation is fair. So if you have a very small child and they're in preschool, they're only going to sit for short periods of time to do a task. And then they need a little bit of movement, because movement's how they learn about their body. So I think it's making sure you're clear on kind of your child's age and what's expected around sitting still. But for some children, it can be particularly difficult. And this can kind of come to light when children go to school and maybe the teacher mentions it to parents, they find it really hard to sit still, they need a lot of movement. So cleverly, kids who need a lot of movement to feel more regulated and in that state that they're ready to learn will often fidget a lot more. So we know as OTs from a neurological and sensory basis that there is a basis to that, so that your children are often seeking that vestibular or proprioceptive input. And I go into this a little bit kind of on my website and stuff. But in general terms, basically, your child is fidgeting because they need movement to be able to learn. So normally, if they are doing a lot of fidgeting, you need to see that as a behavior that's indicating that maybe you need to give them more movement, or maybe you need to change up their seating position. If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure it's a great comfort to parents to know that, that it's not very unusual.
No.
It's quite a normal thing for a child. But do you have tips or advice for parents then on how to support their child in that case, if they do find it difficult to sit still?
So if your child is going to school, it's really impacting on their ability to participate in class or be able to learn and focus for things like their homework. And oftentimes actually meal times comes up as well. They need to be able to sit still to be able to eat. So what I would say is the very first thing is to make sure that your child is in a really good posture, that their feet are actually flat on the floor and that they're in a supported seat. If a child isn't in a supported seat and their feet are dangling, especially at the dinner table, this can happen a lot, or doing their homework, they will start to fidget to be able to support their balance. So that's the very first thing. Make sure they're in a supported seat, feet on the ground. The other thing is some kids need movement more than others. You might actually describe your child as on the go. They're always on the move if they're a fidgeter. So then allow them a little bit of movement. If you're doing a bit of homework, allow little movement breaks in between. Maybe do some of the homework when they're lying on their tummy. They could sit on a peanut ball for part of their homework. But the biggest thing I would say is make sure you schedule time for your child before you do your homework or sit down for dinner to do some physical exercise. So I'm talking about like on the trampoline, in the little booklet actually that you'll be providing. I gave kind of a list of some of my favorite kind of physical activities like animal walks, wheelbarrow walks, tug of war, set up a little obstacle course. And this, allowing them some movement, can really give them the sensory input that they need to sit still, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. And actually, as you're actually saying that, I feel myself trying to sit still a bit more,
Yeah.
planting my feet, and it makes total sense, really. It's just very practical information. And I like the idea of doing something before the homework. And, that sounds like a great idea, really.
Yeah, just settle into it.
Energy. Yeah,
And it kind of settles you into it, and it allows, I think children feel more grounded when their feet are on the floor, as we do as adults. So I think that's really important, is that you really look at the environment around them and then how you can kind of support them a little bit as well.
Great. That's really handy tips. Now, very practical tips as well, which is, it's not something that a parent needs to have technical information or, any specialist equipment for in the home. You did mention homework there, just as you were talking about sitting still. And I suppose a lot of parents would find, that sometimes it's hard to get their child to settle down to their homework and, sit still and actually complete the task. So would you have tips and strategies for parents in that regard, to help cope with doing homework with their children?
I know homework comes up as such a huge thing for parents. I think it's such a stressor in some households. So for some kids, they come in, they do the homework, they can go and play. That's great. But for a lot of children, there is a bit of, frustration, a bit of upset. It can be a major stressor for parents, which it shouldn't be. It should be just like practical learning, extra learning that they can do at home. So the very first thing I would say is make sure you have a baseline of how long your child should be spending at homework. So obviously a child who's in senior infants and a child who's in 5th class will be expected to sit for a lot longer. You need to be clear on this, because some parents will actually sit for hours with their child, and that is not expected. So if you are sitting longer than you would think it should, homework should be, communicate with the teacher definitely to find out how long should we be actually doing the homework for. If it's taking too long, how maybe you can kind of grade it back to what's really needed to be done. The other thing is make sure that the purpose of the activity is done rather than every component if your child's getting tired. So if your child finds writing difficult, or if they find colouring difficult, but the task is actually a maths task, make sure then you just do it orally. Can they do their numeracy? Can they write something in rather than colouring in the whole picture? Because sometimes that can happen. There's a lot of motor skill focus, and if your child is struggling, let's say they have dyspraxia and they struggle with handwriting and colouring, it can actually impact on other aspects of their homework, because the motor skill is like the biggest focus. So I think do some parts of the homework orally to see if your child can really get them. And that can be really helpful and practical as well for parents, that they just jot in some of the answers if their child is getting tired. Like I said in the last one, make sure they're in a really good posture. Facing like a blank wall that isn't too distracting is actually really good. So a lot of kids sit at the kitchen table with their feet dangling and they face everybody in the kitchen cooking dinner, coming in and out. I know this can't be prevented sometimes, but it's so distracting for a child, and the homework can take so much longer. Whereas if you've a quiet, designated area, child can sit, you take out one piece of homework at a time, they have their little checklist that's motivating, and then that's it. Once it's done, and then they can go off and play rather than a kind of dragging out for ages. So hopefully there's some little tips. I know every child is so different, but I actually do some blog posts on this as well on my website in case parents are like, oh, that sounds like my child, I really need an extra bit of support. And something I forgot to mention in the last one around fidgeting, some kids will use little sensory move and sit cushions. They're lovely for younger kids in particular, because they allow a little bit of movement when they're on their chair, because they're like a wiggle cushion. So they can be lovely if you've got a little fidgeter who needs a little bit of movement to concentrate. So that's another little tip for the homework.
Fab. That sounds great. All very practical again. Yeah. I suppose, you're talking about homework and sitting still, and some children find it difficult to just be organized. I mean, that, like, it's something that probably requires, a lot of kind of help and support from parents. So how would you suggest parents could do this, help their child be a bit more organized, develop their organizational skills? Is there a simple way to do it?
Yeah, like there are definitely some, simple kind of strategies and tips that can be used. Organizational skills are actually quite complex. Some children naturally have them and some children just are disorganized. So it is like you can teach skills to a disorganized child. Some children are just pedantic about their things. They love things to be neat and tidy, and that's great. But also you have a lot of kids that really don't see it as motivating. So you want to build those routines in from a young age if possible, so that it just becomes kind of part of the routine. In terms of organizational skills, yes, children who have DCD or dyspraxia can find it particularly difficult because organizational skills have a plan and a sequence to it. So if they are struggling with planning and sequencing, the same for children who have dyslexia, if they have visual perceptual difficulties, organizing where was that thing, where did I put it, can be really tricky. So for children who definitely have an identified need, I would support them at the beginning, you know, show them how to do it, model it, allow them to do it, and then check the process that they use and if there's maybe a more efficient way of doing it as well. So like one thing I would say as well that comes up a lot is a disorganized child can often have very disorganized parents. So I think the first step for parents is try and get organized yourself. You can't expect your child, you know, just to be organized, like go and organize your room if they have no idea how to do it. So definitely for adults, get yourself organized, label things, have a consistent place that things go, declutter. So unclutter your house, you know, so start to move things away, get rid of things that you don't use, because sometimes when there's too much clutter, it's really hard to know where things go. And have really good routines in place in the morning and at bedtime around like packing the bag, getting your clothes ready for the morning, you know, brushing teeth, all those kind of really important self-care organizational skills as well. And then you can build little chores and responsibilities in home, like where did the towels go? Can you put them away, or put away your laundry? So that's all organizational skills. So that's the first thing. If you're a parent, try and get yourself organized. If you're a teacher, try and get your classroom organized, labeled, and, you know, things in place. The other thing I would say is, you know, try and build those routines in early, and also little chores and responsibilities that work on organizational skills. And the other thing is, rather than jumping in and doing it for your child, like, okay, I'm going to clean your room and you need to watch me. That's not really motivating. You need to like model for your child, what are the different steps that we need to take to clean your room? Use visuals if you need to. Maybe your child's more visual, put them up on the back of the door, all the steps that they have to take to be able to master it. So like for cleaning the room, it could be, you know, pick up all the dirty clothes and put it into laundry, get your clean clothes and put them away, then make your bed, then put away your toys, and then dust, or, you know, hoover if it's an older child. So there is a plan and a sequence. And for some children, that's really hard to come up with. They know what they're supposed to do at the end, but they don't know all the sequence of steps before that. So I think using visuals, and then make sure you do it the same way every time, because every time you change it up, that child has to learn a new plan or a sequence. So that's really tricky. So hopefully there's some practical tips around that.
It sounds very logical and sensible. Just, you know, as a mother of teenagers myself, and there are plenty of other parents in a similar position, what about the same tips and strategies for older kids and teenagers? You know, they're a bit more independent, so maybe they wouldn't like interference in their organizational skills. How would you suggest approaching that?
Yeah, so definitely, obviously, if you've got routines in place that have always happened since they're young, it can be easier. But I think with teenagers, definitely, it's more like the organizational skills are really important in school in particular. Obviously, around the bedroom as well, you might still have to be, you know, supporting them a little bit around that. But it's also around kind of that responsibility as well comes into place, you know. So can you increase the responsibility and make it motivating? Maybe they're working towards something, and that could be that they have to, you know, fold and iron clothes and put them away, or, you know, like I suppose you're the whole time working on those independent skills. But from a school point of view, this comes up a lot. So if your child is transitioning to secondary school or transitioning to university, this is where a lot of prepping and practice need to go into organizational skills, because it's so important, because it's all about time management, you know, self-directed learning, getting yourself to class on time. So if your child is transitioning to secondary school, I would say prep and practice as much as possible. Do a mock-up locker at home and show them how you organize it. Try and work out how much time would you need to get your books before you go back to class? How long would you need to organize it? If your child is very disorganized, put all of their subject books into one color folder. So all their English books go into a green folder, let's say. So when they look in their locker, they just have to grab the whole folder. For children who use assistive technology, I often would recommend that their books are on the laptop and that they focus on their organization skills by organizing the folders on the laptop rather than an added stressor of having books and the laptop and everything together. But definitely around school, you do want to prep and practice for kids because it's not that easy. Like not every child knows how to organize their locker. And if they're always losing bits and pieces, put some little strategies in place. Like if they're always losing their locker key, get one of those key rings that tie onto their pants, the buckle of it, or bits like that, or put like the phone tracker on their phone, so if they do lose it they can find it. So you do want to preempt things that will happen as well, rather than just giving out to them when they do happen, so that you put some of the things in place to support them a little bit as well. And I know that even with teenagers, some parents will write their name somewhere on their jacket or their school jumper in case it gets lost. But yeah, it's just around that responsibility, once again, kind of putting those processes and prepping a little bit with them.
Yeah, that sounds very, very practical. I'm sure I'd be using some of those tips myself, because you can even the most organized teenager sometimes needs a little bit of support. So, it is handy to know how to approach it without, causing conflict, I suppose, if possible. So I'm sure like lots of parents who watch this and listen to this will identify with a lot of these issues. So thanks, Jess, for all the useful tips, and I hope it's useful for parents. I'm sure there's lots more information on your website, MYOT&ME.com, if parents want to learn even more.
There's loads, and I do lots of blog posts, and I put videos up on YouTube. So whatever kind of learner or reader you are, there's lots there. And I also have like a learning platform for parents, MYOT University. So if you're a parent that has a child that you feel really needs to work on like motor skills and lots of different areas, that actually might be a really nice practical platform for them as well. So there's tons of information up there for sure.
That's great. And can you be contacted by email? Do you want to give that out, or would you prefer people to look at your website and contact you from there?
Yeah, so if you go on the website, you can actually contact me through there. So it's MYOT&ME.com. And if you email through there, that will come to me. And if you have any questions, or if you're on Instagram or Facebook, MYOT&ME as well, so you can contact me through that as well. So
excellent. And I just want to add, you mentioned the booklet that we're producing also in conjunction with the NEWSTART program. You have some tips and bullet points that are basically similar to what we've discussed here that will be contained in the booklet as well. So any parent who wants to get a copy of that can contact their local library, and they should be able to obtain a copy fairly quickly. So thanks, Jess, for that. It was very interesting. I actually got a lot of information from that myself, and I hope I could say the same for any parents watching this. So thank you very much, and hopefully lots of people will check out your website.
Yeah, thanks a million for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.